Hi, ladies. Today is April 30th, and we are on page 54 in your packet. So today for our CGI lesson, we're going to be looking at the word problem that is in front of you. Katie traveled 6,760 miles to Japan. She read one book every 450 miles. She traveled. So how many books had she finished when she got to Japan? So Katie travels 6,760 miles to Japan. She reads one book every 450 miles she travels. How many books had she finished when she got to Japan? So we know that she's traveling 6,760 miles, and she's going to read one book. So one book gets read every 450 miles that's traveled. Another part that I want to kind of look at is this word every. So every 450 miles is one book. And we want to figure out how many books she was able to finish by the time that she got to Japan. So our question is, how many books had she finished when she got to Japan? All right, so if she travels 6,760 miles and every single 450 miles, so 6,760 miles, so every time that they hit that 450 mile mark, she reads one book. So we want to figure out how many books she was able to finish by the time that she got to Japan. So I want you to think, how can I use this information? So asking ourselves, are we looking at trying to find our whole? Do we know kind of what our whole is? Am I trying to break apart 6,760 miles? Am I trying to make 6,760 miles an even bigger number? Using that clue word every, we know that we can use two different operations, and those two different operations can be multiplication, and then they can also be division. So I want you to think about how that would look. So we're taking 6,760, and we are either going to multiply it or divide it by 450 to figure out how many books that would be. So think about what your visual would look like. And using this word every, am I trying to put these two numbers together to create an even larger number, or am I trying to create a smaller number? Because we're trying to figure out how many books she read. So I want you to think about what would be realistic. Do you want your answer to get bigger, or do you want it to get smaller? All right, so at this point, go ahead, pause your video, complete this CGI lesson on page 54 in your packet. And then once you are finished with your lesson, go ahead and unpause and we'll talk about the answer together. All right, ladies, so let's take a look at our problem for today. So I have listed out 6,760, which is our total miles that Katie traveled on her trip. And then I also have 450, which is the total miles it took to read one book. So I kind of combined that 450 and the one book because those two quantities are really important together, because we want to figure out how many 450s we have in 6,760, because that's going to tell us how many books she was able to read. So first thing that I want to do is I want to take my 6,760 and I want to break it into equal portions of 450. So 6,760. And we're going to be dividing it by 450 because we want to figure out how many equal parts we can create. Okay, so that word every in the problem was actually telling us that we wanted to make equal parts of 450 out of 6,760. Not multiply those together because remember how I said we want to figure out what is realistic. You know, if we take these two numbers and multiply them together, is it realistic that it's going to, if she's on an airplane and she's flying from New York to Japan, is it realistic that she's going to be reading thousands and thousands of books? Probably not. So we want to figure out how many equal groups of 450 we can make out of 6,760 because that's going to be more realistic. So we want to ask ourselves, can 450 go into 6? And we know it cannot. Can 450 go into 67? Again, it cannot. And then lastly, how many times can 450 go into 676? Well, we know that 4 can only go into 6 one time, or 45 into 67 one time. So we're going to put that 1 above the 6. And then just kind of looking at this, our answer is only going to have 2 whole place values, which is a lot more realistic. She's possibly going to read a 2-digit number of books, which would be a lot more realistic than thousands of books. So 450 times 1 is 450. We're going to subtract. 6 minus 0 is 6. 7 minus 5 is 2. 6 minus 4 is 2. And then I'm going to bring down my 0. So now we want to figure out how many times 45 can go into 2,260. So this is where we kind of want to think through how many times, we kind of want to break apart how many times one number can go into another. So I'm going to look at this 4 and see how many times it can go into 22. So 4 can go into 22 5 times. So I want to start by taking 450 times 5 to see if it gives me something close to this. So we have 0, 25, 20, 22. So if you notice, we're extremely close. So this is going to be a 5, but it didn't go in evenly. So that means that we are going to have a remainder. So 450 times 5 gave us 2,250. We subtract, and we get a remainder of 10. But we want to ask ourselves, what was the actual question that they were asking? And it was how many books she finished. So she was able to finish 15 total books, but then this 10 means that she was not able to finish this one in its entirety. Okay, so maybe she had like 10 pages left. So we want to only focus on that 15 because the 15 is going to be the total books that she was able to read from start to finish. So what we want to do is we want to check our work and make sure that we are correct. So in order to do that, we want to take our divisor, which is 450, and multiply it by our whole number quotient, which is 15. So I'm going to use lattice for this. So we have 450, and then we're going to multiply it by 15. All right, so we're going to start with 0 and 1. So 0 times 1 we know gives us 0. 1 times 5, 0 tens, 5 ones. 1 times 4, 0 tens, 4 ones. 0 times 5 is 0. 5 times 5 is 25, so 2 tens and 5 ones. 4 times 5 is 20, 2 tens and 0 ones. Now we want to add using those diagonals. We have 0, 5 and 0. 5 plus 2 is 7. 4 plus 2 is 6. So we have 6,750. But if you remember, we still have this 10 that we need to add back in to make sure that we're accounting for all parts. So we have 0, 6, 7, 6. And if you notice, this is a match. So our answer of 15 remainder 10 is correct. So now for our answer is, we're talking about books. So she read 15 books. So your actual answer is 15 books. It's not 15 remainder 10. We wanted to know how many total books she was able to read from start to finish, which is 15. And then for our answer, for our equation, we're going to actually put out the whole thing because that's what it actually equaled. So we're going to take the 6,760 and divide that by 450, which did equal 15 remainder 10. So this is your answer with your unit, 15 books. But then for your equation, you're going to write out the whole thing with 15 remainder 10.